Paranoia is more than a fleeting worry or a moment of suspicion. It is a state of psychological hypervigilance, often irrational, always consuming, that can distort a person's entire view of reality. At its most extreme, it convinces the mind that danger is ever present, that betrayal is inevitable, and that even kindness may conceal malevolence. And while it can reside quietly within an individual, its effects become far more insidious when it takes root in communities, especially those connected online. The inner workings of paranoia are complex, entangled in both biology and environment. In the brain, paranoia originates in an overactive amygdala, the structure responsible for threat detection. When triggered repeatedly by trauma, chronic stress, drugs, or imbalance, this region sounds a constant internal alarm. Cortisol and adrenaline flood the system, prepping the body for danger that may not exist. Meanwhile, the prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for logical analysis, struggles to keep up, leaving irrational fears unchecked. The hippocampus, where memory and context merge, can add confusion by pulling trauma from the past into the narrative of the present. Excess dopamine is another contributor. In individuals with disorders such as schizophrenia, heightened dopamine in the brain's mesolimbic pathway can create hallucinations and delusions. But paranoia isn't confined to diagnoses. It can stem from PTSD, substance use, or long-term stress. Its reach is wide, and its influence often underestimated. When we talk about paranoia in the public sphere, particularly in digital spaces, we must also consider the psychological phenomenon of shared psychosis, or folie à deux, and increasingly folie à millions. What begins as an isolated fear in one person can be transmitted to others, especially in tight-knit or ideologically bonded groups. On social media platforms, where confirmation bias runs rampant and algorithmic echo chambers dominate, entire communities can begin to adopt paranoid frameworks. Conspiracies flourish in these environments not merely because the information is compelling, but because the emotional contagion of fear finds fertile ground in people seeking belonging, purpose, or answers. Within these groups, suspicion becomes solidarity. Doubt becomes doctrine. Any challenge to the group's belief is met with resistance, labeled as betrayal or even as proof of the conspiracy. This is how shared paranoia metastasizes, quietly, socially, and often under the guise of enlightenment. It's important to recognize how easily these patterns form. Isolation, especially online, plays a significant role. When individuals lack diverse input or meaningful real-world feedback, the digital world becomes their only mirror. Paranoia grows strongest where nuance dies, where critical thinking is abandoned in favor of simplistic explanations for complex problems. In these spaces, even benign behaviors can be interpreted as threats. Someone changing their opinion may be seen as an infiltrator. A member leaving a group might be accused of selling out, or they may be silenced. Leaders of online conspiracy communities may even become paranoid themselves, turning on their followers, purging dissenters, and shifting narratives to maintain control. Ironically, the very mechanisms of paranoia they describe in the system begin to replicate within their own community structures. The signs of paranoia are not always dramatic. A person might begin avoiding phones, covering cameras, or scanning their surroundings obsessively. In conversation, they may hint at hidden meanings or believe they're being watched. Online, this can look like cryptic posts, accusations of agents in comment sections, or relentless pattern finding where no meaningful patterns exist. And when someone dares to challenge their view, their reaction is not one of debate, but defense. To question is to betray. You suddenly become a federal agent to them, or a stalker, or whatever paranoid role they want to place you in because you dared challenge their perspective. Responding to someone in a paranoid state, especially when it's magnified by a group dynamic, requires tact, compassion, and boundaries. It's ineffective to argue directly against their perceived reality. More often than not, this reinforces the very fears they hold. Instead, one must mirror their emotions without validating the delusion. That must be hard, rather than, that's not real. Over time, trust must be built slowly and consistently with transparency and calm communication. But it is equally vital to care for oneself when supporting someone entrenched in paranoia. Emotional exhaustion, compassion fatigue, and the slow erosion of your own sense of clarity are real risks. This is especially true in online communities, where prolonged exposure to paranoid content can start to feel plausible and even seductive. There's no single cure for paranoia. Therapy, particularly cognitive behavioral approaches, can help reframe distorted thoughts. In some cases, medication is essential, but more broadly, understanding the roots of paranoia, neurological, psychological, environmental, and social, offers us a clearer path forward. It reminds us that these fears don't emerge from nowhere. They are, more often than not, survival strategies gone awry. In a time when misinformation spreads faster than fact and loneliness drives people toward digital connection, we must remain vigilant, not only about the content we consume, but about the emotional landscapes we inhabit. When paranoia becomes a shared language, communities can turn into cults, and curiosity can curdle into fear. It is our responsibility, individually and collectively, to offer empathy without enabling delusion, to seek truth without becoming dogmatic, and to foster connection without falling into codependence with fear. In a world already wired for anxiety, let us not feed the fire. Let us be the ones who ask better questions, listen with depth, and gently, persistently guide each other back toward groundedness. And if all else fails, remember this: you cannot change the world, and you are not responsible for fixing others. Your well-being comes first, and it's perfectly okay to step away from the chaos of paranoia and choose peace instead. I am Veni. If you enjoyed this post, please consider donating to me at my support page or becoming a member of my blog community. Thank you for listening.